Hey, Sean.
What's up, Howard Doss?
We are still here cranking out podcasts.
We are.
Crime Con in Las Vegas.
Yeah, so those of you that watch these on YouTube, Howard and I are obviously in the same outfit, so we have not filmed one episode a week over the next 4, 5, 6 weeks, or however many are going to come out of here.
We're in the same stuff.
We're in the same stuff, yeah. We're just knocking these
bathe.
out, taking advantage of running into people here at Crime Con that we can trick, convince, lure, whatever the word is, that we can get them up here to sit down in our little studio that you and Jason set up.
Yeah, Chris Hansen kind of helped us on some tricks to lure people in, and it's really paying off for us here.
Turned out for a great show for him.
Yeah, but you know, this is one of those episodes you like. We got a run and gun cop.
That's how I like them.
I know. You know, I always like the stuff that's a little bit more the details, the technical stuff of it. You like the cop stories.
I like cops, man.
I do too.
I like the cops that are
I like cops too.
The gritty. As you said, I just had to pause here on how to word it. You like the brain side, analyzing things and things like that. I like guys that chase violent offenders. That's, I guess, maybe in a different aspect. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's my jam.
I think we both like both of it. We just have a tendency to kind of lean a little bit further on the other side. But today we got a gentleman with us, Mr. Fil Waters, and he has done everything. He's done a lot of stuff that you've done, except he's done it in big cities like Houston. He's worked in the gang.
Hey, Tulsa's a good. Wait. You say he's done it in big cities. Well, listen.
Tulsa's a town, brother.
Okay, so I know Houston obviously has millions of people there, especially in the metro area. But it's one of the misconceptions people had about Tulsa, Oklahoma, is they think, and we'll get into it here with Phil. He's actually from Oklahoma, or we had no idea until he walked in here today. But Tulsa, our police department has like 830 officers. We're not one of these little rinky-dink ass agencies, man.
Houston is.
Well, you insulted Tulsa. I mean, you insulted my police department,
Tulsa,
man.
Tulsa proud. I like our time. I like it all. Love the TPD.
All right.
So, Phil, welcome today. We're glad to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all asking me to be here.
No, it's a pleasure. And, Phil, as you can see by this delicious plastic cup, it's not ideal, but it is what we're working with here, that's got what appears to be a beautiful brown elixir that's not iced tea. It's actually another bottle that one of the Las Vegas PD retired guys actually brought us. We did for by the name of Ashton Pack. So this is one of their bottles. He came up, we interviewed him, and he shared a bottle with us. So we're going to wrap up Crime Con with our interview here with you and kind of sip on his bottle a little bit more, if that's all right. So cheers.
Awesome.
Appreciate you being here with us.
Yeah, cheers, sir.
You bet.
Oh.
All right. I'm sorry. I almost said
Howard is
Ashton.
very gracious, obviously, to put the brown water that I prefer on the
Yeah,
table.
put the
Oh,
other
he-
one out.
yeah,
he
you
said
did-
he likes Gentleman Jack, and I was like, well, hell, we got some Jack. Let's do some drinking.
Well, he was.
Jack.
He was telling a story from back in the day before we hopped on here about, what did you say, Charlie Pride? Or who was it that was
Johnny Paycheck.
Johnny?
No. Charlie Daniels.
Charlie Daniels. Hey, there's another one. So somebody that sucked down some Jack Daniels, and lo and behold, here you go.
There you go.
Made it work.
All right, Phil. We ask this question to everybody. How'd you become a cop?
It was a calling, would be the short answer. I had a real job before I became a cop. I was a construction manager for U.S. Home in Houston, Texas, and wanted to be the police. And the opportunity was delayed for me. So I got out of the Marines in '82, married my wife. Her family was from Houston. I did what I said I would never do, which was live and work in Houston, Texas. But
I still say that.
I still don't live there. I want to qualify that, but I ended up working there. So it was an opportunity presented itself to become a reserve with the Harris County Sheriff's Office. So that's kind of the way I started, and I was having the best of both worlds. And the Harris County Sheriff's Office, I think they're the second or third largest in the country. So they had their reserve program was like their own separate police department. So I was working 2 or 3 nights a week, riding patrol, working for free, but I was living the dream. And I was making $35,000, $40,000 a year as a construction manager, and I got to the point where the oil industry crashed, the housing industry crashed, and I had to make a decision. U.S. Home was offering me an opportunity to that's what they called them, opportunities. That if I was going to remain with the company, I was going to have to move to either Garden City, New Jersey, or Bakersfield, California. And I went, I don't think those are viable options either direction. So in the meantime, I had a friend who was a Marine, who was a captain at the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, and they called me and offered me a job in the midst of this turmoil here about what am I going to do. So for a month, I wasn't sure, but for a month, I took the job.
And where's Montgomery County at?
The county seat is Conroe, Texas.
Okay.
So Montgomery County, Texas, and I worked night shift in the jail from 7P to 7A. They worked 2 days on, 3 days off, 3 days on, 2 days off. And then I worked for U.S. Home during the day.
Damn, you were busy.
That was crazy.
You weren't sleeping.
No. And I did that for a month, trying to decide what did I want to do. And I wanted to be a cop. And it was a calling. It was just something that the Lord led me to. And so I went from making $35 to $40,000 a year to making $1,600 a month as a deputy sheriff in Montgomery County. And when I talked to my wife, I said, this is what I want to do. She only asked me one question: can we pay the bills? And of course I lied. Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah,
of
we
course
got this,
we
no
can.
problem.
Of course we can. But I tell you what, it was I've never looked back. I mean, I've had an awesome 33-year career. I spent the last 23 years a homicide detective with the Houston Police Department, and it has been the most fulfilling. I can't imagine a better career or a better time in my life.
So how do you end up going from Montgomery County to transitioning later over to the Houston Police Department?
Well, I got fired by the newly elected sheriff. That was the first transition.
What was it? Was it just cleaning? Yeah. Was it just cleaning house? You guys are part of the old regime.
We had a very unique relationship. I was in the narcotics unit, and he was the commander, as he called himself, and he worked for the DA's office. It was a task force kind of setup. And you were trying to kind of define the kind of cops that you like to talk to. Well, in our world in Houston, we distinguish those people by you're the real police or you're not.
That's it, man.
Police.
That's it.
So we.
I say it, man. Phil, I say it. There's a lot of guys in this. Listen, we need all the different types of police officers, hands down. We need guys that are murder police. The homicide guys. We need the guys that are in the gang units, which I think that's kind of where you had a specialty at. And we need the guys that work the traffic. And we need the people that are doing the burger reports. You need it. There's niches that are not for me, and just vice versa. There's stuff that I did that's not for other cops, for sure. But you and I both know, and anybody out here that's in law enforcement listening knows, there are also people that what I call play cop. They get to tell their friends and their family that, hey, I'm a police officer for Houston or Tulsa or wherever it may be, and they collect a paycheck from that police department that says they're a cop, but they're not doing real police shit.
The paper police.
That's it. And I joke, or some of the guys that I worked with, we joke that there were guys that should be charged for embezzlement, for collecting paychecks as a police officer.
Government, right?
The fact that they collect a paycheck as a cop, man, should get charged for embezzlement.
Sure.
So, but sorry, go ahead.
Well, so didn't mean to do that. So to answer your further your question, but I knew this was coming in terms of the change in my life at that time, and I had already prepared for it. So I had applied with DEA, and it had been accepted at DEA, and knew where I was coming back to, and then I had applied at Houston PD for the lateral entry program. And so I knew what was happening, and then I got the blue letter there were 22 of us that were fired immediately. I mean, like that, 1st of January 1993, as a result of this election. So In fact, I actually got screwed over by 2 politicians in that same time frame because I had been accepted at DEA. I was supposed to go to the academy in the fiscal year 93, which starts in October of 92 for the federal government. They took a hit in their budget, so I get a call and said, look, you're going to be going to the academy. That academy's been canceled. You'll be going to the one that starts in February. But okay, cool. Well, if you all remember, Bill Clinton was elected president in November of 92, took the oath in January of 93. 2 weeks later, puts a federal hiring freeze on, and I turned 37 in August. So that screwed me.
You're too old.
Yeah, too old.
So there's an age limit for a lot of these federal jobs. A lot of police departments don't have an age limit. It's kind of like if you can pass the physical, and the city medical will look at you and see if you're a liability for injuries or something like that. But those federal jobs, they have an age limit.
37's a cutoff.
Typically.
It is, and then there's a mandatory retirement at 57.
Yeah.
So that was, but you know what? Like I said, the Lord puts you where He wants you, and at the same time, in fact, we were in Hawaii in December celebrating our wedding anniversary, and I got a phone call from HPD and said, "You'll be attending the lateral entry class." They just didn't know when, and so then in July of '93, I started the lateral entry class at HPD. It lasted 9 weeks long, and I'd been a cop for 10 years by the time I started that, so I went, and I knew a lot of guys at HPD. I'd worked with them when I was in narcotics and that kind of thing. And the narcotics guys wanted me to come to narcotics. So I had buddies of mine in homicide. They're saying, no, you need to come to homicide.
No, our team's better. Come to
right,
our team.
exactly, right. It was kind of like a draft, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I'd done the narcotics thing. It was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it. And I thought, you know what? I need to try something a little different in the homicide aspect. Investigations has always intrigued me. And one of my mentors, my good friend that kind of ushered me into that, he said, it's the best job in the building, and if it gets in your blood, you'll never leave it. Mm-hmm. And I never did. I didn't want to promote. I was a homicide cop, and that's what I wanted to retire as.
Yeah, and you see that. I mean, we've got legendary guys in my own police department, same type of deal. They've gotten in there, and they were in there until the end of their career.
Right.
Or guys that got in, did promote, Dave Walker, Mike Huff. I mean, guys like that. Another guy who never promoted by the name of Mike Nance. I mean, he was in there forever. He's now retired, legendary homicide detective in Tulsa. And just as you were saying, you get in there, it's in your blood. The solving these crimes, finding these bad guys. I mean, it's just a generic term. Helping these victims, the families. We've had guys that got in, ended up leaving. They do promote. And as soon as a corporal or sergeant or lieutenant position, something like that opens up, I mean, they're right back in there. And then they ride out to the end of the career. And that's guys like Mike Huff and some of these other guys.
Yeah.
Well, you have found, once you got into homicide, you found that you kind of had a little niche you're pretty good at, huh?
I had the desire to be the best. And I'm not saying that I ever achieved that, but that was my desire. Always to learn something new every day. Don't take anything for granted. And develop the ability to not only communicate with the bad guys, but to communicate with the families that have been so affected by a crime of violence. And so that's kind of where I went in my career, and I was fortunate. I had great partnerships at the beginning of it, and then at the end of it, I partnered with who was my best friend in the department at the time. We'd gone through the lateral entry class together. We were both intrigued with the art of the interview, and we developed a curriculum that was required training for anybody coming into investigations at HPD, and taught it. He continues to teach it, although he's retired and working for another agency, and I teach it when I'm requested to do so. In fact, I was involved with the International Criminal Investigations Training Assistance Program through the State Department and DOJ, and taught National Police of Ukraine detectives in the interview and in investigations. So it's been...
Well, let's talk about the interview. That's really where you made your mark. This is
Right.
when you sit down with somebody and you get them to actually tell the story. What kind of black magic do you use to do that?
Well, I try not to use Jedi mind tricks.
Okay, but it happens.
But it does happen. Every once in a while, you got to pull it out of the toolbox, right? But I would say that the the first thing that I realized going into homicide was that it's clear that I'm employed by the Houston Police Department, but that I work for God. So there's no one that's going to give a voice to these victims and their families except for people that do what I do or did. And that was always the frame of mind in which I had when I walked into the interview room, and I try to develop that skill. There's a lot of guys that'll tell you, because they can shoot the bull with you, that they're going to be great interviewers, and that's just not necessarily the case.
Yep.
So you have to develop. I teach in my classes, talk about it's not rapport building, because rapport building is shallow and it's temporary. So what you want to do is you want to build a relationship and understand that everything that you do through life is a relationship. Now, they may be shallow, short term, they might be long and very deep, but nonetheless, no matter who you meet and come in contact with, it's always a relationship. When you come out of the chute, doctor slaps you on the butt and says, "Welcome to the world." That's a relationship. So I just tried to carry that philosophy on through my career, and developed an empathy for people. And that's most important in the interview room when you're talking to a suspect. I mean, you're talking to somebody who has taken another human life by an act of violence, and it's my job to get to the truth. It's not my job to develop the charges. That's decided by other people. And that's what I would tell them. So my first priority is to gain their trust. And I have to do that by being empathetic to where they are and having an understanding about the three things we have in common.
Yeah, just not to deviate from what you were saying, but I just recently was on a news show, and they were talking about false confessions.
Right.
And, some in the media, when one of these stories comes out, they're hammering the police about it, and they highlight stories like this as a regular occurrence. This happens, and we're just like, listen, the number of cases, whether it's homicides or people that confess to a shooting, a robbery, a burglary, an auto theft, or whatever it may be, the false confessions, when you look at the totality of numbers, is a tiny deal. And you hit it right on the head right there. It's not an investigator's job, whether they are investigating any of those type of crimes, obviously homicide being at the top of the food chain. It's not to get a confession because that person across the table is sitting there. It's to get the truth.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that people understand that when a detective like yourself or somebody sitting in there, you're not there just to get this person right here to confess. You're there to get them to tell the truth, or a witness, or anybody else that's coming that you're interviewing.
Regardless of who the interviewer is. Yeah, Howard.
One of the things that you really brought up was empathy.
Right.
And in my profession, it's paramount. If you don't have empathy for being a nurse taking care of people, you can't do it. I tell people constantly, my job has nothing to do with medicine. It has everything to do with people.
Right.
When you talk about empathy, and this is kind of hard for a lay person to understand, when you're an empathetic person, you can understand people's perspectives even though you don't agree with them. For example, a murderer, a criminal, someone like that, you can see them as a person, which is tough to do, especially if you know the crime they've committed. But did you find that helped you gain, being an empathetic person, helped you gain that rapport with them almost instantaneously?
It helps establish the relationship, and through the course of the interview, you have to be available,
non-judgmental,
to share a little bit of yourself. So we talk about in our training, when I talk about training in the interview process, is the life lessons, stories that you have that you can share with them. Doesn't mean you're going to be swap and spit with them at the end of the story, right? But you share a little bit of yourself, and that lets them know that you're not being judgmental, like you said, Howard, and you are being empathetic to the situation they find themselves in. And there are some people, look, I worked on over 400 homicides in the city of Houston in 23 years. That doesn't include murder for hires, aggravated assaults, kidnappings, and the other stuff that comes with working homicide.
Right.
But of those 400 homicides, they had a 96% clearance rate.
which is
Heck
and-
yeah. Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah. And 90% of those, I gained confessions, just to use the word. I gained confessions in those cases. Now, some of those may have been self-serving statements, but that's okay. I'll take it. But it just goes to show that because body language is body language, verbal behavioral stuff, physical stuff, it's all the same, but the approach of how you look at that person sitting across from you is what's going to, at the end of the day, is going to be the payoff.
Okay, so you said something very very intelligent earlier about the fact that you said you want to
I've got to write that down, Howard.
Very
what was
intelligent.
that?
You
Very
said
intelligent.
You want to learn something new every day.
Correct.
So we're going to talk about, you had a 96% clearance rate. God, that's amazing, right? That's so good. Let's talk about them 4%, though. Now, why didn't you clear those? What'd you miss there? Because I'm sure that you've thought about those cases. What did you not learn from those?
The good news is that there were some of those cases, because of the work I did, that were cleared later by the detectives in cold case that picked those cases up. So that's the good news. Now, not all of them, of course. And the best answer I can tell you is that I did everything possible that I could do to solve that case, but there are just some cases you hit the wall,
sure,
and that's it.
And I guess the thing I'm asking you, which is the one that kind of haunts you that, man, I wish I could have done something different in this interview and got this out of. I run into people in my line of work. Sean runs into people in his line of work. They're not like us. They're not human. They don't.
Oh, no.
You don't have the ability to empathize with them because you can't possibly think like they do.
No.
And it's not so much even thinking of it. It's just basically walking behind them and looking through their eyes. Those are the people that really worry me. Those are the people that I can't understand, and those are the tough ones. So, did you have any of those cases?
Well, I had the ones. If you're referring to the ones that I was not able to close, I've had a couple there that the kind of the traditional. I knew who did it,
right,
and couldn't prove it. Just didn't have that one
witness.
affirmative link.
That's a lot of gang murders. I mean, like I said, and not to cut you off, but I know from whether it's open shooting cases we had where somebody didn't die or some of the gang murders. Again, Tulsa, you watch First 48, I mean, they have a very high clearance rate in Tulsa. Very fortunate because, as you and I both know, there are police departments around the country that have horrific. I mean, I'm talking like in the 30%.
Oh, yeah, Chicago.
Places like that. That's their closure rate on homicides that have.
I didn't know that. I had no idea.
Absolutely. Like, yeah, I mean, it's insane. So when you're talking, him as an individual having a clearance rate that high, or police departments that have very high numbers, that have very high numbers as far as clearances when they are in a department that has a lot of homicides. I mean,
right.
Like I said, if you're in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and you have 2 murders a year and you have a 100% clearance rate, well, that's a big difference between.
Well, it looks good on paper.
It looks good on paper, yeah. But when you're talking an actual, larger agency that has a lot of bodies, it's tough. But it's the gang-related stuff. There's even just, like I said, open shooting cases, not necessarily homicides. You know who did it. You just can't get that one person, that one witness that's going to help wrap it up.
Well, you can't get the person. If you've got a talking complainant,
if you've got a victim, they're
not going to.
They're going to take care of it.
We'll go take care of that later on.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, and like I said, it was kind of, I don't know if the word's your expertise, your niche, or whatever. You worked a bunch of the gang stuff down there. And you're right. That's even, speaking for my own experience, when the victim of this violent crime dies, a lot of time those are easier to solve than the guys that are alive that refuse to cooperate. Or like, even if you're like, hey, we know this is the suspect, and he's like, well, I'm not testifying. I'm not telling you anything.
Well, the gang guys, my partner at the time and I, we had really an incredible success rate even with the gang stuff.
Yeah.
Now, when that all started was in 90, what was that, 90, or I guess it was 2005, right? When Katrina hit?
Mm-hmm.
That was about August of 2005.
You guys got a large influx of people.
Oh, golly.
Tremendous numbers.
They filled the Astrodome.
Yep.
Mayor White at the time, yeah, come on over here, we'll take care of you. Well, of course, as they started filtering into the area, the Catricians started coming in.
Did you call them Catricians?
That's I say. I've never heard that term. We got some of those in up in the Tulsa area as well. Yeah, we had them at the National Guard.
Term of affection.
Sure.
Term of
that's it,
affection.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And we, as New Orleans homicide rate started to drop, of course, Houston's went up exponentially, right? And of course, we were dealing with. I made so many trips to New Orleans. I don't ever want to see that city again. And it was
No beignets for you.
it was unbelievable. And I never saw a larger group of people with the capacity to lie about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it got so bad that the judges in Harris County got together with the district attorney's office and the heads of the law enforcement agencies around Houston and determined that we were going to put everybody that would not identify themselves in jail for failure to ID.
Really?
Yes. And people were getting put in, left and freaking right. And then, of course, we're working with we ended up getting Louisiana's databases to see we can determine fingerprints and
Who you guys had, yeah.
to get who do we have, and one of the guys that stands out in my mind in that time frame was a guy named, he called himself B Stupid.
Capital B.
Appropriate. And the gang situation in New Orleans much different than the gang situation in Houston. They were built on the wards and the areas that they lived in New Orleans, and in Houston, it can be built on neighborhoods, but you're talking about Crip, 5'9" Bounty Hunters, which is a blood group, 5 Deuce Hoover Crips, that are a Crip group, and then you've got these different variations, and they're all tied to some sort of and then you've got La Primera, you've got different
Hispanic stuff,
the Latino gangs and that kind of thing. So really just a hodgepodge and a melting pot of gang activity. So that's why the gang murder squad was formed, because at the time that the Catrician folks that were coming over were getting in the fights with the traditional gangs in Houston, and the gangs and the people that were killing people from New Orleans, they were indiscriminate, and it was just unbelievable. And they're used to Napoleonic law, where if they don't make the case in 60 days, they get booted. They get kicked to the curb. And these guys were coming over and doing what they did, and the great intimidation of witnesses in New Orleans and that kind of thing. That's why these guys were getting released. They come to Houston, Texas. They're sitting in the jail. 60 days comes up, and they're
counting down.
They're counting down. That 61st day hits, and they go,
What the hell?
"Why am I still sitting here, man?"
Yeah.
And it's just, welcome to Houston, Texas, brother.
Welcome to Texas.
Yeah, there you go, man. And it was a learning curve for us as homicide detectives on dealing with a different type of individual.
During your 23 years there in homicide, again, talking about like the gang-related murders, or obviously you're a homicide detective, you're on call. Body happens, whether it's you're on the rotation or however it comes up. What's one of the cases that obviously every single one of them has meaning? There's a victim, there's a victim's family and things like that, but kind of one of the ones that just, I don't know if I used a word that hits home more, or you and your partners had more drive on. It was more of the community was a part of it, something like that just really stuck out to you even looking back now.
Well, Sean, that's a great question, and I would answer it this way.
Again, and I don't want to cut you. Again, I don't want to diminish any of them. Every single one of them.
So I think you'll understand my answer then with what you just said. What I realized in that 23 years of working homicides, it didn't make any difference if you're a crack whore in the ditch, or if you're a socialite living in River Oaks, which is the exclusive section of Houston. That person was someone to somebody. They mattered. So the drive to close those cases, find the right person who's done the wrong thing, and bring about a measure of justice and hopefully some peace for the families of the victims was the drive. So there are certain cases that stuck to me.
Of course.
Only because of the nature of the case itself. But in terms of a drive to solve, I hit every case determined that I was going to close it. Every one of them. I don't care who it was.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, because it's obviously there's, whether it be in the media or the social media, and obviously policing such a huge topic. And I've tried to explain that to people. I'm like, we in the gang unit that I was in, you and I don't know each other. Today's our first day meeting each other. I was in the gang unit for 14 years in Tulsa as a supervisor for that unit. Obviously, we worked all the gang-related shootings. We worked hand-in-hand with our homicide unit on gang-related murders and things like that. And I try to explain to people, it's like, listen, we don't care. That call comes in and we get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go out there and work. We work that thing just as hard. If it's a shooting, we work it just as hard for someone in this community as we do when someone on the other side of the city. It's the same thing. Obviously, if it comes to closure or arrests are made and convictions, part of it's part of the court system. The other parts is how cooperative are our victims or our witnesses. That's the deciding factor. It's not going to be you or me that's, man, I don't care about this case. I'm not working it any more difficult. But during my career, there was one deal. It was on a Sunday morning. This is still when the bubble caprices were around, and those are those were a great bad guy.
We called them
Shamus.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing when I came on. Everybody. I mean, I started in obviously later in my career than you, but I came on in '97, and you had guys that were still driving the old, early '80 Cutlasses and the box Caprices and all that fun stuff. But there had been a shooting the night before that we had gotten called out about. Some gangsters shot another rival gangs. Guy got shot. Nobody's cooperative. Fast forward to the next morning, and one of the suspects from the shooting the night before, rival gang, were in a baby blue bubble Caprice, a Shamook type Caprice. Well, these gang members that were neighborhood Crips see who they think's a Hoover Crip, and it turns out to be 4 kids that are actually coming from church, and they're just driving a baby blue Caprice that matched the description of the night before.
Wow.
So they see these kids up at a convenience store, close to one of these neighborhood Crips homeboys' houses, and they run over there and get a chopper. They grab a rifle and then pull up next to it, and the guy leans out the window and just starts unloading. And one guy loses an eye, another guy's paralyzed, one guy's killed, another guy's shot through the lungs, and one guy somehow makes himself tiny and gets down between the seat and underneath, the floorboard, and somehow doesn't catch around. And it was just a horrific case. We get called in at like 10 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, and we've worked every single case the same and still did up until I retired. But these were kids that were coming home from church.
Right.
They were just mistaken for rival gang members, and we ended up getting everybody that day. We recovered the rifle. We ended up getting, catching a guy up short, and it took a short time later, within the week or two or something like that, us and the fugitive warrant squad, we tracked down the actual trigger man that was involved in that.
What was the age of the shooters?
I remember his name was Vincent AJ, or I'm sorry, not Vincent AJ. His street name was Venom. Was this kid's name? He was,
how old was he?
18, maybe.
So he's right in the same age group.
Same age group. They were all the same age group.
Yeah.
And he was convicted, and he's in prison for the rest of his life. But it's one of those. It was early on in my time in the gang unit, and when I retired last year, it's still one of those cases that just always stuck out. And I can remember probably almost every single shooting, murder case that we went out on. But those are the ones that just when you look back on a career and you go, man, I'm glad that the guys that I worked around with chased, these guys responsible for that.
Well, the work in those gang cases are always a challenge, only because of the culture within the gangs. It's you don't talk to the police and all that stuff.
A lot of them they do.
But but what I have found is you treat everybody with dignity and respect, and there's 3 things we all have in common that allows, at least in my career, and this is what I teach, allows us to do that. And it crosses all boundaries of race, creed, color, religion, culture. It doesn't make any difference what flavor you are. Mm-hmm. If we remember that 3 things we all have in common, even guys from Arkansas.
Jesus.
We all want to be loved. We all want to be respected, and we all want to take care of those who love and respect us. We just make different choices about how we accomplish those three things.
Yeah, spot on.
And that gives you the ability to, anybody that will apply that, gives you the ability to speak to, in our context, in that interview room, with somebody that you have absolutely zero in common with. And I know some of the gang guys. We had a guy named D-Loke. They've always got the street vernacular, right?
Be stupid.
Right, exactly.
Oh,
Be stupid.
I mean, the do wrong, do dumb. I mean, you name it. These are real names.
D-Loke
real
was
street
actually
names.
he was a Houston turd. He was an OG, the YOG, the Young Original Gangsta, for the Five Deuce Hoover Crips, and they'd been involved in a deal where they were going to do a punishment thing on one of their guys, and blah blah blah, and they ended up killing some people. But anyway, long story short, I had him up in the interview room and treating him with dignity and respect and so forth and so on. And I asked him, names are important, so I asked him, what do you want me to call you? And he said D-Loke was fine. That was fine. And I said, well, I appreciate that. And I said, I'll be right back, and I'm gonna come in here and talk to you for a little bit. And he said to me, he said, well, Mr. Waters, he said, I know you were going to come and talk to me, and I know I was going to have to come down here and talk to you because you're homicide. You're like above HPD.
Yep.
And I said, like, look at him, and I said, true that.
Yep.
Then I walked out, and I came back in. We had a real nice conversation. So again, you treat people with dignity and respect, and you'd be amazed at the communication and relationship you can have with them.
I was actually just here at CrimeCon. Somebody asked that question. I've been asked it before, like, ended up in doing some of this media stuff, and like, weren't you ever worried about when you were out on the streets dealing with people? And I said, man, listen, if you're a cop, there's this weird, I guess, mutual respect probably a lot of people don't understand between police and gangsters. There really is. And it's like, man, if you're not beating guys up, if you're not stealing dope or money from them, if you're not planting dope on them, it's the game. They understand, hey, they're bad guys. They know we're doing our job. They're doing their thing. It's the cat and mouse game. And it's like, as long as you don't belittle them when you talk to them, you don't talk about their dead homeboys, in that way. When you have to sit down in an interrogation room, or you catch them up short, even something as simple as you stop them on a car stop and it's an ex-con you catch with a gun, and he's like, you know what, I've already been to prison. I don't want to do this shit again. And, as long as because you interact with a lot of the same guys. Your witness to one murder is going to be a suspect in another,
right,
or a victim in another. So you get to know a lot of these type of people. But just as you're talking about, as long as you treat these guys well, it's beneficial at some point down the road, more times than not.
Oh, it is. Absolutely is.
Yeah, and listen, I also want to say, I know I said the murder suspect, his name was Venom. I'm blank on his real name. That's his street name. I mentioned a Vincent AJ. He was actually the victim of a homicide, a gang-related deal. So I just don't want to make sure there's any confusion there.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting to me about all this is the integrity that you guys are showing, and I think the public needs to understand that. As a police officer, there's a level of integrity that you have to have, and that integrity kind of, I guess the best way to define integrity is what you do when nobody's looking, right? Like, you go into an interview room, nobody's in there. There may be a camera on or something, but you go in there with that respect. You go in there and you treat your suspect with the integrity that you have and expect them to return that to you. Usually you get pretty good results. Obviously, yours is just 96%. I mean, you could have done a little bit better, but that's kind of the way it works.
We tried.
And I think the public misses that. I think they miss that in order to wear a badge, you have to have a level of integrity.
Well, the cops are held to a higher standard, as they should be.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely. No qualms.
Me too. As a nurse, hell yeah.
No qualms about that. And I can tell you that the average citizen comes in contact with a police officer, with law enforcement in some capacity, like 2.5 times in their lifetime. I don't know where that half comes from. That's a short police officer. I'm not sure what that is all about, but about 2.5 times in their lifetime, and their feelings or understandings or opinions about law enforcement are going to be based
Off of that.
primarily on that, but then the rest of that influence is going to come from where? What they see on television. And that's going to come from television shows, from media, whatever that is going to be. And we all know, especially in today's world,
It's not positive.
the skewed view of police officers that is based on a false narrative is really, really upsetting. And these guys and gals that are coming into law enforcement now, God bless them.
Mm-hmm.
If this had been the state of affairs when I was a cop, started being a cop 35, 38, 36 years ago, I wouldn't have joined up for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But, it's a they're being called and they're coming forward and they're doing it. Although the recruiting efforts around the
Tough.
country they suck. I mean, it's just terrible. And then you get the guys that just come in and want to want a paycheck. And those are the guys, those are the paper cops that they don't have any passion
the
about
police.
this. I think,
No, they
yeah,
don't.
they're not.
I mean, hell, listen. There's some social media accounts out there that that I follow, police related, post a lot of good stuff. They'll find a body cam, a dash cam video of an incident that's happened, and they kind of break it down, looking at the tactics that were used and the safety and stuff like that. But there's another one that's out there right now. It's called Survive Policing, and I don't know who's running it, but this guy was clearly a cop in a decent agency. He knew the job, the right way, and he kind of calls out these cops that are on here doing fucking TikTok videos, while they're at work, and that's what I'm saying. It's like they're just all about. They want to be social media influencers as police, and it's like
man.
it is.
That's
And thank you. That's
embarrassing.
exactly it. He calls them out on it, and and it's. And I know they talk about interacting with the public. It's like, man, that's not what being a cop is being on social media, posting pictures of yourself all the time, doing that stuff.
That's self-promotion.
No, that's exactly what it
Well,
is.
it's idiotic.
It is, and it's and then I've
It
looked at,
diminishes the professionalism of the badge.
I've looked at some of the
I
people that are doing this, and you could see their patch in it, and you'll find out what agency they're working for, and it's some rinky-dink agency that has no crime, and it's like, come on, man.
Well, and they got the chief involved. The chief, like.
Well, so all right, so you retired from the Houston PD. You obviously stay very active. You're out here, one of the speakers at Crime Con. What are you doing these days?
Well, I retired on December 30th of 2017. On the 1st of January 2018, I opened up a private investigation security company, and I'm now, 4.5 years later, I'm now the president and CEO of Kindred Spirits Investigations and Security, Inc.
Kindred Spirits sounds like a liquor store.
Well, it has a lot
Do
of
you have any Weller?
it has a lot of connotations.
Can you hook us up with some allocated whiskey?
I can find it for you. I guarantee you. I'll find you whatever brown water you want.
All right,
We
deal.
like brown water. It likes us too.
So what exactly are you guys out there doing? I mean, I see
Wow.
your beautiful business card here.
I do everything. Any type of investigation. I've got some great resources. I've got some guys that some operators that I can bring in when I don't have that area of expertise. If it's a fraud investigation, I've got guys that I can bring in that will do the fraud investigation, and they'll brief me on it so that I can go to the client and say, here's what we're coming up with.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we have suspects, we did a corporate internal theft thing for a freight company. Then I come in, my guy does all the bean counting. Found out that they had stolen collectively among these 5 people over $250,000.
Mm.
In brown liquor.
Well, I don't think that may have been a celebratory part
Yes,
of
yeah,
stealing
okay.
the money.
Yeah.
But they, when it came down to it, then it was time to interview them. So I went in and brought my guy that knows the technical stuff, and I conducted the interview with them. And we interviewed 5 people. We got 5 confessions.
Fantastic. How can anybody find you out there if they're looking for, whether it's you on their podcast, you want to hire, your company for some of the investigative work you're doing and so forth?
They can go to www.kindredspiritsinvestigations.com, and that's my website. Tells about myself, and then it tells about the services that my company offers.
Phil, it's been a pleasure.
It has.
Been awesome. I love it.
We like having a drink with you. We like the integrity. I damn well like the empathy, man. That's the thing that the whole reason we do this podcast is kind of humanize cops and shit. You're a good human, man.
Well, I appreciate that. I really do, Howard. Thank you.
Congrats on your career.
All right. Thank you very much, Sean.
Cheers.
All right, buddy.
Oh, wait, that's not liquor.
I kind of finished
Yeah, I
mine.
forgot.
There we go.
Water,
So there you go. All right. At least it was the water and not this.
I know we're gonna.
He did that earlier.
Serve